It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the groups and teams of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at Group B, Spain, Albania, Croatia, and Italy. Here we go. It's the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada, Series 25. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor, and today we are looking at Group B for the Euro Cup 2024 tournament. This group is made up of Spain, Albania, Croatia, and Italy.
Yeah, and we're currently focused on the 2024 Euro Cup here, and the Copa America also played in June 2024. And we're producing this group and team series as well as a player series for each. There are two parts to this media cast.
So in part one, we'll give a summary of each team's World and Euro Cup histories, and we'll also take a bit of a closer look at their recent history and form, including how they qualified for this tournament.
Yeah, and in part two, we'll look ahead, we'll look at the teams in comparison to each other, looking at their rankings, head-to-head history, and their chances of success. And we'll end with a discussion of their prospects and our predictions.
All right, well, you're ready to get started?
You betcha. Let's begin with Spain and kind of a historical view before you give a recent view. And Spain was actually not a powerhouse in the early years. They enjoyed intermittent success, fourth place in the 1950 World Cup, a Euro Cup title in 1964, and a second place finish in the 1984 Euro Cup. But for the most part, they struggled to reach tournaments and were knocked out at the group stage if they did. When these cups expanded, the World Cup in the 1980s and the Euro Cup in the 1990s, they not only became consistent qualifiers, but regularly passed the group stage. From this time, they can be seen as a top-tier team, although the quarterfinals became a psychological barrier for them. They overcame this finally in 2008, the start of a dynastic period which saw them win 3 titles in a row, a feat unmatched even by Brazil or Germany. That ended with a rare group stage knockout in the 2014 World Cup, but they've since returned to regularly passing the group stage. In qualifying, they're imperious at home, never losing there in a World Cup campaign and losing only twice in Euro Cup qualifying, the last time being in 2004.
Wow. All right, so since the group stage exit from the 2014 World Cup, Spain has passed the group stage in every competition, finishing in the round of 16 in the 2016 Euro Cup and in the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. Euro 2020 saw them reach the semifinals. In qualifying, they remained imperious, as we said, finishing first in their group, suffering only 1 draw at home and dropping only a few points on the road over all of these campaigns. 2022-23 Nations League A play saw them drop points to all 3 teams, including a rare loss at home to Switzerland, but nevertheless they won the group, which took them to the final in June 2023. Having finished second in those finals the previous edition in 2021. In terms of style, Spain retains a tiki-taka style of keeping possession and passing around in the opponent's midfield, the style which some find infuriating, but which carried them through the successful period around 2010.
When we say some find infuriating, what pops into your head?
I guess that would be your mother.
Yeah. Your grandmother, she just finds Spain so frustrating to watch. Well, for this group, we're going to, in the kind of recent history here, going to look at the Nations League 2022-23, because 3 of these teams qualified for the finals. So we think it's kind of significant in looking at their form, really. So do you want to take us through their campaign? The first part of that was in June to September 2022, and then the finals were in, I believe it was June 2023.
Yeah, that's right, after the World Cup. So yeah, Spain was in a 14 group with Portugal, Switzerland, and Czech Republic. And as you mentioned, Kevin, they dropped points to each of those teams, tying Portugal at home, Czech Republic on the road, and then that rare home loss to Switzerland. But they won their other 3 games and actually finished first in a very tight group. Spain, Portugal, and Switzerland separated by just 2 points, but Spain coming out on top.
Yeah, our graphic there, for some reason, Czech Republic got cut off, but they were the last group and thus demoted to Group B.
Yeah. And then in the semifinals, they met Italy, who they meet again here. Spain won that match 2-1. And then in the final, they met Croatia, also in this group. That game went 0-0, and it took penalties to decide, which Spain won 5-4.
Right, so you can see right there in the semi-final and final why it's significant to our discussion here, but Spain coming out ahead. Let's take a look at the Euro Cup 2024 qualifying, the campaign that got them here.
Yeah, so Spain lost their second qualification game in Scotland, but won all 7 other games. So showing very strong form, and in fact, not falling behind, after losing to Scotland, not even so much as falling behind in a game until they met Scotland again towards the end of the campaign. So yeah, Spain finished with 21 points, 4 points ahead of second place Scotland. So kind of a typically comfortable qualifying campaign, despite that loss in Scotland.
Yeah, always very consistent in qualifying there, but doesn't always translate in equal power in the cup. All right, that brings us to the end of Spain. So let's move on to Albania. And I'll start with kind of a summary of their overall history. So Albania actually has a long history, first entering both cups in the 1960s, but absent from 4 tournaments up until 1980. They were a weak team in the early years, but regularly stole a result or 2 at the game level in each campaign. After their weakest period in the 1990s, where they lost all games over 2 campaigns, they improved from finishing last in the table to second last in their campaigns, and sometimes better, though never in the top half of the table. An impressive campaign in Euro 2016 qualifying saw them take second place to reach their first cup. They generally have finished in the top half of the qualifying tables since, which Connor will give more detail in their recent performance.
Yeah, so starting from their second place finish in qualifying in 2016, they have finished in the top half of the table in all campaigns except Euro 2020 qualifying. That performance came with the embarrassment of a home draw with Andorra and hinted at a return to the bottom half of the table where they historically landed. But a solid campaign in 2022 World Cup qualifying, with 2 wins over and finishing ahead of and improving Hungary, brought them back to the top half of the table, and they impressed further by winning their 2024 Euro qualifying group. Even the success, though, has been largely due to being competitive with second-tier teams, and in a couple of recent campaigns, they have failed to do so. Their 2020 Euro Cup qualification run saw them finish 4th, and in their 2022-23 UEFA Nations League B campaign, they would likely have been relegated had Russia not been disqualified from their group. Albania is not yet a second-tier team, despite generally moving in that direction.
Right, and we'll take a closer look at those 2 campaigns. First, the Nations League 2023 run.
Yeah, so they were in League B. It was a 4-team group until Russia was expelled. So it left them with Israel and Iceland. And Albania actually had 1-1 draws with Iceland, home and away, and 2-1 defeats to Israel, home and away. So they finished without a win and 2 points, but Russia's expulsion meant that they weren't technically last in the group, though were last among the 3 teams that were competing.
Yeah, and probably would have been last if Russia had been involved. Okay, let's take a look at the more successful qualification campaign for this tournament.
Yeah, so Albania lost narrowly 1-0 to Poland in their opener. Not probably an atypical result, but then were undefeated through the remaining 7 games, including beating Poland 2-0 in their reverse fixture, as well as a 3-0 home win over Czech Republic. And Despite a 0-0 draw with Faroe Islands, their consistency over Moldova and the Faroe Islands, combined with those home wins, put them ahead of both Czech Republic and Poland. Though Czech Republic, they both finished with 15 points and only a superior goal difference. Saw Albania top the group, though both teams moved on to the finals tournament.
Right, and we should point out, perhaps significant to our discussion later, that Albania allowed no goals against at home, and then just one goal against in each of their away games, including that loss to Poland. So looking pretty stiff defensively, hey?
Yeah, that's a good point. And, on the topic of goal difference, them and Czech Republic both scored 12 goals, but the Czech Republic conceded 6 versus 4. So it was the defense that helped Albania top the group.
Yeah, well noted. Okay, let's move on next to the third team, Croatia. And in their overall history, Croatia was a new name in world soccer from 1996, but far from a new presence. They played a role in Yugoslavia's long history, and actually, given their success as an independent country compared to the other teams that made up Yugoslavia, it was likely more than the 20% credited to them by FIFA. Nevertheless, Serbia is considered the descendant of Yugoslavia, even though Croatia's record is more similar. The success of both Yugoslavia and Croatia is intermittent, featuring high highs and low lows. Yugoslavia had finished twice in the top 4 in World Cup competition and twice in second place in Euro competition, but reached only half of the cups in both tournaments. 1976 had actually been their last strong performance. Croatia, as an independent country, jumped into action quickly, winning third place in the 1998 World Cup. But then it quickly resumed a pattern of intermittent success, undergoing a long dry period from 2000 to 2014, going beyond the group stage in only one tournament during that period, and failing to even qualify for one World and one Euro Cup in that period.
However, Croatia came out of their slump with a round of 16 finish in the 2016 Euro Cup. Their star does not shine as brightly in that competition, with the quarterfinals being their best result. But it's in the World Cup where Croatia has excelled, bettering their third place finish of 1998 with the second place finish in 2018. Then, amidst predictions of the team aging out, earned third place in the World Cup in 2022. They also proved themselves earlier that year in the 2022-23 UEFA Nations League, where they won the group over France, and in the following year where they reached the final of the Nations League, which we'll talk about. Still, their success is accountable to their veterans, so it remains to be seen whether they can remain a top-tier team going forward, or whether they will fall back into the intermittent slumps that they and Yugoslavia before them were prone to.
Right, so let's take a closer look at that 2022-23 Nations League campaign.
Yeah, so for Croatia, it started with the 3-0 home loss to Austria, but that actually was not a sign of things to come for either team. Austria would pick up just one more point, and Croatia would then tie France and win the remaining 4 games, including away wins in Denmark, France, and Austria. So that propelled them to first place, actually a point ahead of Denmark, but 8 points ahead of France. So that was some measure of vengeance for the 2018 World Cup final defeat.
Yeah, ghastly performance by France there.
Yeah, and then in the semifinals, they tied 2-2 with the Netherlands, but won 4-2 with 2 extra time goals. And that set up a final against Spain. And as we saw, that game finished in penalties, Spain the ultimate victors.
Right, so narrowly lost there. And actually in that semi-final, that was hosted by the Netherlands, making it a bit more of an impressive result.
Yeah, very impressive overall.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take a look at their qualification for this cup.
Yeah, they were part of a fairly tightly contested group, it has to be said. Croatia at home beat Latvia and Armenia, but then tied Wales and lost to Turkey, which kind of opened up the door for some of those other teams. They were good on the road, though, A 2-1 defeat in Wales was their only drop points. So at the end of the day, Turkey finished with 17 points, Croatia 16, and then Wales 4 back with 12 points. But it was a competitive group all the way till the end, especially after Croatia lost in Wales. Nothing was certain for those top 3 teams until kind of the final weeks.
Yeah, a bit of an odd campaign there, because Wales bested them but finished 4 points behind them, whereas they bested Turkey but finished behind them. So I think the most notable thing, what you said there, is their weakness at home, because they're a bit like Spain, or until recently they have been a real fortress at home. So a bit disturbing, I think, for the Croatian fans there.
Yeah. But in the end, they got here, so they'll be happy enough with that.
Yeah, and we should also note some of the scorers in that, because we said in the summary that they're still kind of supported by their veterans. So Kramaric was their top scorer, and Kovacic, both of those in their 30s. Kovacic was their second top scorer, along with Petkovic. But we kind of upset some of our Croatian fans with the aging out theme. But I think we'll upset them more, because I think that's still something to think about with Croatia.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll save that until the discussion and move on to our 4th team, Italy, and begin with kind of an overview of their history. And from their first World Cup title in 1934, Italy has ranged from being a world powerhouse to falling off the soccer map. All 4 of their World Cup titles came amidst controversy, and they can be an infuriating team both in their style and behavior. Their famous Catenaccio style, most prevalent in the 70s and 80s, saw them scoring a single goal and then going into a defensive shell to see the game out, including using time-wasting tactics. But their success of reaching 8 World Cup semi-finals can't be denied, unless it's by a 20-year dry period after the war, or by failing to reach the last 2 World Cups. Despite a Euro Cup title in 1968, the early years of that competition were weak, failing to reach 5 of the 8 cups. Since 2000, however, they have reached a final in half of the 6 cups, winning it in 2020.
In terms of Italy's recent history, it's kind of hard to peg a regularly qualifying team that failed to reach the last 2 World Cups, and sandwiched in between that was a Euro Cup title win. So hard to make a lot of generalizations.
Yeah.
Both World Cup qualifying campaigns were solid, losing only 1 game across those 2 campaigns. And in both cases, they lapsed only in the playoffs. So they were close.
Yeah.
There were certainly no lapses in the 2020 Euro campaign, though, which saw them win all games in qualifying and in the Cup, and without the inflammatory drama that sometimes accompanies their campaigns. Inconsistency lurks still in a strong performance in the 2022-23 Nations League play, followed by an unconvincing, though successful campaign for 2024 Euro qualifying.
Right, and let's take a closer look at those now that they're on the tip of our tongue. The 2022-23 Nations League campaign.
That's right. So they opened with a draw at home to Germany. And then they also went on to beat both Hungary and England at home. And then on the road, they just suffered 1 defeat. That was to Germany, but Germany actually finished 3rd in the group, and England last, it should be said. So Italy had a record of 3 wins, 2 draws, and 1 loss, and they finished with 11 points, a point ahead of surprise second-place finishers Hungary.
Yeah, kind of an odd group there again. Italy's inconsistency showing this time in terms of unexpected strength, but England relegated from the group. Wow.
Yeah. And then in the semi-final, they met Spain, and as we saw, Spain won that match and proceeded to the final. So Italy, I guess, a top 4 finish in League A, which is impressive, but didn't make it to the final.
Yeah, we'll take a look at Spain and Italy's head-to-head, because they often seem to meet. But let's move on to the qualifying campaign for this tournament.
All right, so in Euro 2024 qualifying, Italy lost home and away to England, who topped the group. Italy otherwise won all their games at home and dropped points just in away draws with Macedonia and Ukraine. The draw in Ukraine was their final match, and a significant one, because had Ukraine won, they would have overtaken Italy in second. The two teams ultimately finished tied on points with that draw, and Italy with the superior goal difference. So they knew a draw would be enough, but it did come down to the final day to determine who would qualify for the finals.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think they went into that game thinking that a draw would be enough, and they were pretty successful in closing up shop there. But I wonder if their Catenaccio style is still a thing. They did allow 9 goals in qualifying over 8 games. That's quite a bit.
More than you'd expect. They also scored 16. So, you know, perhaps even in the last Euro campaign, they were probably a bit more open and exciting than probably that style of old.
Yeah, definitely are coming out of that style. Thank God. Okay, let's move on to part 3 and part 2 that should be, and a comparison of the teams on a few bases. The first one is the pots.
Yeah, so unlike the pots being based on FIFA ranking, which is typical, here they were based purely on qualifying performance. So it kind of rewarded a good qualifying campaign. So Spain were the pot 1 team. They actually had the 3rd best qualifying campaign out of anyone that qualified. And then Albania, as a group winner, found themselves in pot 2, which is quite surprising. That might have perhaps led to an easier draw, but it probably didn't play out that way, as Croatia were the pot 3 team and Italy the pot 4 team. Italy, as we saw, just squeaking into the Euros on goal difference. So them, Serbia, and Switzerland, and the 3 playoff winners comprise pot 4. So kind of interesting there that, you know, Italy and Croatia would probably be pot 1 or 2 teams normally. We're pot 3 and 4, and you know, all got grouped together.
Yeah, I mean, viewers who didn't know might have looked at the podcast and thought that we made a mistake in having Albania as the pot 2 team. And then I even questioned it, thinking, oh, okay, well, Albania must have had a more convincing campaign. I knew that Croatia and Italy were a bit unconvincing in their campaigns. But in fact, Albania was even more unconvincing. I think 3 draws and a tie. So it seems like them having finished first is the only real defining feature here.
I think that's it. I think all the first place finishers got the top seeds, and then they ranked the second place finishers. So Croatia and Italy both finished second in their groups.
Yeah, but we'll see on several bases that, you know, Albania is not really the pot 2 team, or you know, not really the second strongest team. And let's move on to rankings, because that makes it clear as well.
Yeah, so Spain are 8th in FIFA and 3rd in ELO, the 2 ranking systems we consider. Spain has basically been a pot 10 team for the entire decade. And a decade ago, during the height of their power, with those 3 consecutive titles, they were number 1 in both FIFA and ELO terms. They've since dropped, remaining in the top 10 in FIFA, sometimes just barely. In ELO, they dropped less, tending to still be in the top 5. And as it is, they're 8th now in FIFA, 3rd in ELO. So kind of a bit of an average of where they've been over the last little while, but top 10 for sure.
Yeah, and I don't really have anything to add to that. I think you covered it well. Let's move on to Albania.
So Albania are currently 62nd in the FIFA World Rankings and 54th in ELO. That kind of is average for them, perhaps a little bit of an improvement with the qualifying campaign. They also saw a little bump around 2016 when they qualified for their very first tournament, Euro 2016. Kind of slipped a little bit and now have risen a little bit on the strength of their most recent campaign. But kind of in the 60s and 70s is where they generally lie.
Yeah, and that's significantly below the other teams in the group. So let's move on to Croatia.
Croatia are presently 10th in FIFA and 11th in ELO. It's no surprise that they peaked at 4th in FIFA and 11th in ELO back when they reached the World Cup final in 2018. Historically, for the last 10 years, they're generally a top 20 team, often finding themselves somewhere between 10th and 20th and rising above that occasionally.
Yeah, and another peak in reaching or in performing well in the 2022 World Cup, but they seem to slide back, below 10th fairly quickly after those successes.
Yeah, despite a strong campaign in the Nations League as well.
That's right. Okay, well, Italy is also kind of in and about.
Yeah, Italy are 9th in the FIFA rankings and 12th in ELO. Italy, have been a top 10 team for a lot of their history, but kind of during that dry period of failing to qualify for World Cups, they slipped a bit, but then of course rose during their success in the 2020 Euros. So a little bit up and down. They've never really fallen out of top 20th or top 20 in the last 10 years, and kind of 9th and 12th is probably their recent average over that period.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it is a little bit up and down, but I don't think the rankings really show it because when they have it down, they have an up fairly quickly afterwards, both with Euro 2020 and the 2022-23 Nations League campaign. So it's not really dragging down their ranking that much. But of course, in terms of results, the non-qualifications for the World Cup, it's very much up and down.
Yeah, a very good observation.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to look at the head-to-head records, and we begin with Spain versus Albania.
Yeah, Spain and Albania have met 7 times, and Spain have won all 7 of those matches.
Right, and their most recent meetings were in 2018 World Cup qualifying, Spain winning both games there. Next we look at Spain versus Croatia.
Yes, they've met 3 times in competitive fixtures. This excludes kind of the Nations League and what we're looking at. And Spain has won 2 and lost 1.
Right, and we are thinking of adding the Nations League, but I'll deal with the official record here. That's just qualification and tournament games. We don't include friendlies, but all of those are fairly recent from 2012 to 2020. In 2020, it was the round of 16 in the Euro Cup, and Spain won that. It was a 3-3 game, which they won 5-3 on penalties. And then, as we saw, very similar in the Nations League, which we didn't add to the numbers here, but we're considering doing that in the future. But again, Spain won the game, but it required penalties to do so. So very tight between them.
Absolutely.
All right, next is Albania versus Croatia.
Yeah, these teams haven't met, so no record to speak of.
Right, they'll begin their record here, I guess. And our next one is Croatia versus Italy.
Yeah, this is interesting. They've met 6 times and drawn 4 of them, but the only team to win is Croatia. They won the other 2 matches. So Italy has actually yet to beat Croatia in a competitive match.
Right, and those, results, the recent ones are from 2012. They met in the group stage of the Euro Cup, and then twice in 2016 Euro Cup qualifying. 3 ties in their last 3 meetings, so again, very tight. Next, maybe the most interesting one here, Italy versus Spain.
Yeah, a very long history between these 2 teams, and a very close one too. Italy has 5 wins, so they edge out Spain. There have been 4 draws, and Spain have 4 wins. So very, very close.
Yeah, as you say, a very long history. They met in the 1934 World Cup quarterfinal. That was hosted by Italy, and they tied in the first game. And in the second game, Italy won, but the referee was later banned for his favoritism. He was kind of under pressure from Mussolini there, so a bit of a questionable result all the way to recent times. And they've met a lot since 2012 onwards. 2012, they met in the Euro Cup final, and Spain thrashed them 4-0. Really interesting results since then. But 2016, 2018, 2020 Euro semi-final, that was a 1-1 draw, which Spain won on penalties. And then, as we saw in the recent Nations League campaign, Spain actually taking that one, but Italy with a slightly better record. But it couldn't be much closer.
Yeah, I'll just correct you. The 2020 Euro Cup semi-final was won by Italy in penalties.
Oh, yes. Okay, of course. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, most recently they've exchanged wins. So, even in the recent one, very tight. Okay, and the final one we look at, Italy versus Albania.
Yeah, they've met just twice competitively, and Italy won both those matches.
Right, and both of those were in 2018 World Cup qualifying. So that is that. I would say overall, we're already getting lots of signals that this is a very tight group, or at least among the three teams. Let's move to pots and odds and see what the odds makers are saying. We don't have any odds, unfortunately, on winning the group, but we can look on the odds given for the teams to win the tournament. And what are they saying, Connor?
Yeah, so Spain have a 12 point or just over a 12% chance to win the tournament. So that's that's the highest in the group, and among they're kind of one of the favorites for the tournament overall. Italy come in at just under 6%, so about half the likelihood of Spain. And Croatia a bit under 3%. And then Albania are given just minute odds at 0.29% in winning the tournament.
Right. So, we see Croatia here at about 2.6%. Italy with basically more than double the chance, and Spain with more than double the chance of Italy. So the odds makers aren't seeing it as tightly as some of the other things we've looked at.
All right. So based on those odds, with Spain kind of significantly ahead of the other two, do you kind of agree with that, at least at the group stage level?
I gotta say, no, not really, and I think that's a good place to begin our discussion. Like, more broadly, do you see it as? I guess I've already said what I think, but do you see it the separation that the odds makers seem to give compared to the tightness that we saw in other factors?
I see this group as tighter. I see among the top three, really, Spain, Croatia, and Italy, I see this as quite wide open and kind of hard to predict. I think each team possibly capable of winning the group or finishing third. So no, I see it tighter at the group level than the odds makers do.
Yeah, and I mean, in fairness to the odds makers, they are predicting their odds in the overall tournament. So not just the group. I'd like to see the odds for the group, but we don't have them. Let's begin with Spain. They're considered the strongest in a lot of the metrics, even if it's just slightly in the other metrics. I see them as probably the strongest in the group. How about you?
Yeah, probably do as well. I mean, Italy are the defending champions, so they have that in their favor. And out of these teams, Croatia went the furthest in the World Cup, but then Spain also were the Nations League champions. So they all have an argument. But Spain qualified, I think, the most impressively. In the most recent kind of head-to-head meeting, that would be the Nations League, and Spain was successful in that. So, overall, I see them as probably just stronger than the other two.
Yeah, I do too, but the reason I don't agree with the odds makers there is that, Spain, as we said repeatedly here, is very good in qualifying and really a fortress at home. But that success doesn't always translate to a good cup performance. And they kind of run the danger. I know they reached the semi-finals in 2020, but since 2014, they run the danger of kind of going back to their old jinx of the quarterfinals being a bit of a psychological barrier. Do you see that as a factor here?
I think it could. I mean, they had a super successful period about a decade ago, but they aren't actually a team that has a lot of titles to their name. So yeah, they do seem to struggle or kind of meet their match later on in tournaments. They may do well here in the group stage. Yeah, it's definitely a barrier for them, like you said, to kind of overcome that again and really reach another final since the end of their really strong period.
Yeah, I mean, I should have said kind of in the broader view. I know the last group, Group B, we kind of went back to historical, kind of the historical strength of the team to help distinguish them further. I kind of feel for this group that recent form is a bigger factor than historical form.
Yeah. I think for maybe looking at recent form, I mean, maybe we'll talk about Italy because they're kind of the most difficult to predict based on recent form. Of course, two failed World Cup qualifying campaigns with a Euro Championship between that and a good Nations League performance. But then, kind of a very close qualifying campaign. I think Italy's the team that it's kind of the toughest to know exactly what we're going to see from them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think moving on to Italy next was a good decision. The odds makers see them as the second strongest team, and there's definitely justification with them being the defending champions. But wow, so inconsistent that you really don't know what you're going to get from them. I almost consider them a bit of a wild card in this team, capable of either winning the whole tournament or failing to advance from the group stage. It could be either one.
Yeah, I agree with that tag. Kind of the most unpredictable. They could go extremely far. Not much was expected of them in Euro 2020 when they went really far to win it. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
And then we look at Croatia too, and even in FIFA rankings, the teams are currently 8th, 9th, and 10th. That's Spain, Italy, Croatia. Very little to choose from them. And Croatia are right on the heels of Spain and Italy in terms of rankings.
Yeah. We'll move on to Croatia soon, but I wanna quote a line that I wrote in my write-up for Italy. They have scaled the heights and plumbed the depths.
And that's true. That's just in the last couple of years for sure.
Yeah, but of course, those FIFA rankings that you talked about do speak to how tight we think the actual group is. And so let's move on to Croatia. We got in a little trouble before the 2022 World Cup by saying they were aging out and not predicting they would go that far. And obviously, they proved us wrong there. But I think it's still a factor. Do you?
Yeah, I think it's more a matter of if or of when, not if, in terms of the team aging out. I mean, they've had some generational talents, of course, notably Luka Modric, who's now into his late 30s, and I'm actually not sure if he's retired or not.
No, he isn't actually, or he hasn't so far, and I doubt now that he will before the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Croatia does produce a lot of talented players. They aren't a one-man team by any stretch, but they've had really some special talent that's taken them to 2 World Cup semifinals, and it is inevitable that a lot of key players are aging. So I think you're right. We were premature in predicting their downfall for the World Cup. I mean, the timing of this, it's only 18 months later, so it's not dramatic. I think they've got, possibly one good tournament left in them still, and then it will remain to be seen how they refresh without Luka Modric, most notably.
Yeah, and well, who's the guy who played for Tottenham last year? He hasn't played for them this year, and I'm not sure if he's still with them.
I'm not sure offhand. Oh, Perisic.
Yeah, Perisic. I was trying to find the name. I'm not sure if he's actually moved to another team now, but we're talking about several players. Luka Modric probably the first among them, but several players, and those veterans have still largely been responsible for their results. So I don't really have a sense of how they're refreshing. I know new players are coming into the squad, like Vardiol. So they are capable of refreshing. I just don't know if those new players are going to take them to the heights that they've reached, especially in the last 2 World Cups.
I think that's it. I mean, they have good players. They'll continue producing good players, but to be the level of, reaching World Cup finals and stuff, I mean, it's inevitable they'll drop off somewhat from that. It's kind of how far will they go, and it may not be that far. They may still be a very competitive team, kind of as a second tier or kind of pushing first tier strength.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about there kind of refers to the historical strength on both them and Yugoslavia, who in spirit they seem to be the descendants of Yugoslavia because their record is quite similar, peaks and valleys, So it is possible that they'll return to being a second-tier team, as you say, not insulting to Croatia. That's just the way it's been, and kind of teams like Belgium and Poland and stuff. They have their good periods, but they're not as consistently strong as Spain and Italy are. Well, I mean, in the long history, we said that they had their weak periods too, but I would say generally not as consistent as Spain and Italy.
Yeah, I think that's a fair and accurate assessment.
Okay, well, we're kind of putting those three in a group, and naturally so, FIFA rankings and the fact that Albania has never gotten so much of a point off of any of them. Do you see Albania playing a role here?
Potentially. I mean, I think they'll come in as underdogs and will embrace that. There's not going to be a lot of pressure on them. They did manage a win in the Euro Cup 2016, a win over Romania in their final game. So they do have points at this level. That was their first ever tournament. This is their second. So yeah, I mean, a good qualifying campaign, being as high as pot 2 will boost them, where they had some good results over Czech Republic and Poland, who are respectable teams, if not kind of tier 1 level teams. So yeah, I think they'll be competitive. I think they'll. I remember them being competitive at their last tournament, and I think they were kind of spirited, and put up a good show of themselves, even if it may not translate into points. So I see that being the case here. It may not translate into points because this is such a tough group, but I think they'll be spirited, and I think they'll give good games. And you mentioned their defensive strength. They might not be as easy to break down as as perhaps Spain, Italy, or Croatia would like.
Yeah, I could imagine a tiki-taka game kind of surrounding the box with Spain to drive my mum crazy there. Being impenetrable at the edge of their box, and Spain just hovering around trying to get into the box.
Yeah, I mean, they'll inevitably, I think, have to be a bit defensive and then look for a break, but they won't be easy to play against. I don't know that will necessarily translate into points. I mean, any points they take could be significant, in the ordering of the other teams. It's really tough to say, even at a game level, how these results will go.
Yeah, I just want to address a couple of things you said there. And I think you realized as you were speaking that, Albania's wins really have been over second-tier teams. The win in the 2016 Euro Cup, the qualification against Poland and Czech Republic, they haven't been really a team that steals points off of top-tier teams. Italy went out to... no, I'll get to that later. But they haven't been a team that's really, as far as I know, challenged the top-tier teams. So I think that might make them a bit in for it in this group. They're going to be calling this a group of death. However, I'm gonna say that would be a misnomer, because there is a chance that all three of them, Croatia, Italy, and Spain, will all advance, especially if Albania becomes the whipping boy in the group, and that's what it would take. Do you see that as the outcome here?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I think all three teams could advance because there's a good chance they all do beat Albania, and often just one win is what you need. It's difficult for Albania because instead of drawing Croatia, they could have got someone like Slovenia or the Czech Republic, a team they've beaten, or they could have got Poland instead of Italy. So it's a bit tough on them that they can't measure themselves against a second-tier team in this tournament. They're playing three really top teams. But you're right. I agree with you on the point of the group of death, is that all three could get out of the group. And Yeah, that may even be psychologically be on their minds, perhaps accepting a draw in a game rather than risking defeat.
Yeah, actually, then we could call it a group of death for Albania if things go as predicted.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Do you see any one of the teams, which it may come down to, any one of the teams being more vulnerable to Albania than the others?
Um, I mean, Italy's been a bit inconsistent. Croatia, we saw them a bit uncharacteristically dropping points to Wales and Turkey, and some, maybe Wales and Albania could make an argument for being somewhat similar. The Wales have a bit more pedigree, so Croatia have dropped points in qualifying to kind of lower tier teams. So maybe Croatia, but I think Albania will be pretty heavy underdogs in all three of their matches.
Yeah, that's true. It may come down to that. I think for my part, I think Spain is probably the least vulnerable to Albania, but you never know how these things will turn out. For me, that would that's one of the factors that makes me think Spain is slightly stronger than the other teams in the group. But I feel like you've been kind of dodging yourself in making a prediction here. Come on, Connor, lay it on me. How is this group going to turn?
Spain to win the group. I'm going to go for kind of slightly more recent consistency and say Croatia second, Italy third, and Albania fourth. And I probably think all three teams will move on to the knockout round.
All right, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I'm going to say Spain, Italy, Croatia, and Albania. But as we said, Spain, could end up anywhere from first to, well, probably realistically third. Yeah. I don't think they'll fall behind Albania. And really, I think whether the third team passes, I mean, what, 2/3 of them do, right? Yeah. 4 out of the 6 teams. So there's a pretty good chance of them passing in third place. But I think that comes down to whether Albania can actually pick up any points from anyone. So I do think they play a really important role.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Any final thoughts as we sign off here?
No, an interesting group for sure. You could have a very strong team come in as a third seed, which could, really affect the round of 16, right? There could be a group winner playing any one of these teams in the next round. So it's a tight group, but even more so, it could set up a really good round of 16 game or further, because you're going to have probably a strong team in each of the 1, 2, and 3 seeds. So how this group settles could actually have a big influence on how the entire tournament plays out.
I agree with you. I don't think there's any kind of growing into the tournament, given how tough this group is. I think if you drop points early on, you still might pass the round, but then be facing a really tough team in the round of 16. So that's a good observation. Okay, well, that is it for Group C, and we will see you next time for Group D.
Yeah, we'll see you then.
We would like to thank Mike Tripak, Make Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this media cast.